Welcome to the Mobile Hunter Podcast. We're your hosts, Rick Cates, Chris Leppert, and Josh Luck.
What's up?
Hey.
And tonight, we are bringing you a really, I think, interesting podcast that we haven't done in terms of our turkey stories or turkey coverage over the past couple of years. It's more of a deep dive into um, turkey broods, turkey habitat, turkey, turkey everything. Not so much shooting turkeys in the face, but how to shoot turkeys in the face and feel good about conservation all in one sitting.
Well, I mean, it's literally like what's funny about this is it gets a little nerdy and a little, you could probably even say a little hippie-ish, but it's literally the best way to make sure you get to blast one of those little bitches in the face every year. So if you like shooting turkeys in the face, just turn the damn podcast on and listen. And by the end, you're going to be like, oh, damn, that's pretty cool.
At the end, you're going to be a Zach Kaiser style Disney princess with birds and butterflies around you, wanting to bathe in a river and hug trees.
Right?
Yep.
There you go.
150s walking around middle of the day, every day.
2 p.m. Check this 150 out. I don't want him.
Well, as I stated, this is more about turkey habitat and really turkey ecology as a whole. So, Josh, you've done a little bit of listening, done a little bit of research on this. So I'm going to let you take the reins on this, and I'll fill in where I can. Chris will fill in where he can, and kind of go over some thoughts and things that we've had discussions about with regards to some recent media that's come out surrounding turkeys.
Yeah. So, as I told you guys, I'm gonna plug this podcast because I think it is not ours, another podcast, because I think there's a lot of good information on it. It's called Wild Turkey Science. It has two hosts, Dr. Marcus Lashley and Dr. Will Goldsby. They are both professors. Forgive me, I do not remember which universities. I think one might be at Auburn. Is the other one at Florida, maybe? I know one might be associated with Florida.
The SEC people are going to hate us about this.
Right?
But so they have a podcast called Wild Turkey Science, and then a lot of their episodes are kind of deep dives into a lot of the literature and research based around the wild turkey, and they themselves do a lot of research around wild turkeys. So it's kind of a nerdy podcast, if you will. I will kind of preface this for our listeners. If you're not used to listening to things that are very research oriented, you might struggle at some points. Like I was listening to an episode they did on turkey ecology. They started talking about K values and R values and like population dynamics and stuff like that. Not every episode is like that, but it can get pretty nerdy at times. I found it interesting, but
super interesting.
yeah, some people might find it dry. But I've been kind of rolling through these episodes, and
I'm holding my jokes in.
I got a great joke for that.
just let it out.
You keep going.
So I have been listening to quite a few of their podcasts, and they bring up some really, what I have found very interesting research and things that I feel like we could apply in our own tactics, scouting. You know, like Chris said, trying to get on birds and shoot them in the face, right? And I thought it was something very applicable to what we do on the podcast. So essentially, we're going to present some of that information and then put it in kind of our terms, the hunter terms, how we would utilize it and how we can capitalize on that information.
Sorry. There's a great segue for this too, like towards the end that we'll hit with, and how this really goes into a lot of the same things that you have heard on this podcast recently in terms of native habitat, why it's so important, and why doing things in a certain way is for the greater good of your deer herds, quail, if you have quail, or any other type of upland songbirds and things along those lines too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanna actually quote Dr. Goldsby, I believe. He was on the Southern Outdoorsman podcast, and he had two quotes that just
Oh yeah,
slapped me. One is habitat remains undefeated, which it does. And what's so crazy is as we get into this travel hunting more and more, and we start studying and kind of keeping track of where we're finding all these different animals, it's always it's always the same. You always find them in these cuts and these burns and these places where the habitat is just beautiful and diverse and everything. And then the other one that kind of blew my socks off. It was pretty awesome because you always hear people that are so concerned with trapping. And before I even knew a whole lot about any of this stuff, I used to think, well, where where does mommy going to hide? Me and Josh found a hen nest like in the middle of the woods
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
doing nothing. And I just thought, well, how the hell are you going to hide there? There's nowhere to hide. Your whole nest is guaranteed to be destroyed soon,
Mm-hmm.
and the hen's probably going to get killed too. Um, so I thought, what does it really matter if she doesn't have a place to hide? You just need a couple of coons or whatever's going to kill them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a bunch of places for them to hide and stick to cover, well, then you can have a bunch of predators. And I'm not saying that's great, but you can have a healthy ecosystem essentially and plenty of turkeys. And so he said habitat management is predator management. And I thought,
Absolutely is.
all be damned. Like, that's absolutely right. So just wanted to kind of quote him. We got to hear him on Southern Outdoorsman, and then Josh listened to some of their podcast, and then I listened to some on a flight a couple weeks ago, and they have some really good stuff to say.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they do.
And back to your comment, Rick, of as far as we have talked about a lot of this in relation to deer, but it all applies to turkey too.
Mm-hmm.
And going off of what you said, Chris, about the habitat management as predator management, in some of those episodes, they do get into what some of the literature says and what the research has shown as far as like percentage improvement for like nest initiation, survivability rates, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And when you improve the habitat or in an area with improved habitat, those things do increase. Like you said, it just gives them, it gives them everything they need: places to hide, places to evade predators. It gives them good nesting, brooding habitat. It gives them more sources to eat from.
Yeah.
Just kind of improves everything.
I mean, when you think about it, open up the crop of a bird. Where do you get on doves? You don't get on doves, in the middle of nowhere, in
No.
the middle of a barren forest or whatever. You get on them in short grass fields, sunflower fields, corn fields, etc. Or you can shoot them off the power lines like Josh does on Saturday morning. Yeah. But I mean, you literally, I mean, all you gotta do is open up the turkey's crop and find out what he's eating, and more often than not, it's literally looks like you opened up the belly of a shark. There's everything in there.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And so they require all this different stuff to eat, and it just makes so much. It seems so easy to me.
I mean, one of my favorite quotes about turkeys is like like they're born knowing that something is going to kill them all the
Yeah,
time.
they really
And,
are.
and we'll get into this a little bit later, but nests, like when you have a hen who's nesting, we've talked about this before. 75% of that nest will not survive. Okay, then 75% of the birds that do survive out of that don't survive. So you're only left with a few birds at every clutch during the course of the year. And we'll get into a little bit of this and really more of a theoretical construct that kind of goes into why turkey populations fluctuate the way that they do, but also the potential to look at why turkey booms happen in certain areas
Mhm.
during certain amounts of time as well. And you know Ohio's a one bird state now. Kentucky is a two-bird state in the spring and a two-bird state in the fall. We changed this year, last year, from a four-bird state to a two-bird state, and there's reasons for that, and it kind of goes into some of the literature that both those gentlemen were talking about. But
Yeah.
I'll keep that stuff until Josh points at me and says, "Rick, talk about this."
One good thing, one good way to look at it, kind of how you just put that with 75% of the nest hatching out, and then 75% of them dying as well. So 75% not making it, and then 75 more percent of the actual hatched out birds not making it.
Yep.
Normally, when you see groups of jakes, for the most part, those are brothers.
Yep.
Do you see groups of 12 jakes and 18 jakes? You see groups of 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 and 6, and every once in a while you'll see more than that. I've seen 10 at one time. Clearly, somebody had a good year, but when you think about it, imagine if you didn't have 2 or 3 of those birds surviving, and now each group of jakes was 5, 6, or 7.
Right.
Now you got a shitload of longbeards, just continually. You don't have 2 longbeards, and then therefore a huge instability in the whole flock, and they're scared to death to come into the field. They won't gobble or anything because the jakes will go beat the shit out of them. So just a way to look at it. But Josh, take us into it, man.
So I want to start with probably what to me was one of the most profound things in one of their episodes I was listening to. And it was actually a recent episode. I think it was episode 122. We'll put a link in the show notes so you guys can also listen to that. But it's called We Did the Math. So Dr. Goldsby in that podcast essentially goes through the math of if you have this many hens, about how many gobblers are you going to actually have that make it to 2, right? So he went through all the literature, and he first did it for the average landscape. So something that hasn't had habitat improvement done to it, just kind of your average terrain, average landscape. And he went through the research. Okay, he used the number 50 hens as an example. So he went through that and said, okay, the research says this percentage will have nest initiation. On average, the clutch sizes are this big. On average, you'll get this many that hatch. And then he goes through and says, on average, this many will survive to 1 month. And then at the end goes on to, okay, this many will survive to 2 years old. And essentially, from your 50 hens, the attrition rate for gobblers in this case, which is kind of what most of us are concerned, right? Because we're wanting to shoot a gobbler. So from 50 hens, you'll get about 10 2-year-old birds in a 2-year time frame. So he took that number. That was an example. Yeah, it wasn't a lot. So from 50 hens, 10 gobblers.
That's rough as shit.
Yeah.
And you think like the average egg laying from a hen is anywhere between 10 and 15 eggs.
Yeah.
They averaged 10 would
10
make
eggs,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. A clutch size of 10 is what they used.
Damn, man.
So 50 hens, 10 gobblers. So then he looked at, okay, just let's say you start some habitat management, your first year of habitat management. Took a look at the research and did the same thing again. On average, how much does nest initiation increase? How much does your survivability rates increase, etc.? So he went through the same numbers. Started with 50 hens again. From those 50 hens, you now end up with 23 2-year-old birds.
Wow.
So a 2.3%, 2.3 times, sorry, not percent.
I was like, it seems low.
Yeah, almost 2.5 times greater the following year. That is the following year,
Yeah.
right? So just even 1 year, and they didn't even talk about it being like very high quality management that had been done over years. That was just with 1 year, and they said they felt like that was fairly conservative.
Wow.
Yeah,
But I'm drawing up numbers in my head right now from looking at like success rates and buck to doe and bull to cow ratios for
Mhm.
out west that they
Yeah.
list. And
Hmm.
so they always go 100 does to however many bulls or bucks. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be like a 46 to 100 ratio, which is pretty damn good if you're looking at deer and elk and all that. Normally it's 20s and 30s. So
Hmm.
that's solid, and that's year one.
Yeah.
God,
Not even with real strong
yeah,
habitat improvement. You got to think about what turkeys like being in. We had Shane when we had Shane Simpson on here, and he talked about kind of how turkey populations plummeted in South Carolina all those years ago is because they came in, they logged, and they just dumped all the shit all over the ground, preventing birds from doing what birds need to do. You look at areas where um, hay fields are, or just allowing acreage to grow up, and give that nice thick kind of understory where those poults and stuff can survive, or where those hens can get in a nest. That's not even real hardcore habitat
no,
improvement. That
Mhm.
that that's just allowing a little area of a property to take growth of what it's supposed to look like in a regular day or a regular year prior to going in and bush hogging it or something.
Yeah. And I don't recall, I don't know if they gave specifics as far as the habitat improvement. I'm assuming they meant like general cutting
Mm-hmm.
and like general burns. Um, they have other podcasts. They have a Dr. Greg Harper. It's Greg or Craig? Maybe it's Craig Harper.
Craig Harper.
Yeah, but he does a
Yeah.
lot of research on burning and burning at different times of the year. But they didn't specify when they were talking about this. So in general, just kind of general cutting, general burning, and you'll get that much improvement. So that was that was kind of a staggering number. I was like, oh man, like okay, how would that apply to me? That's what I was thinking while I was listening to that. And I'll go back real quick. So that was just year one. Now, if you have the same habitat improvement or continue to improve upon it, right, that number is just going to compound.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that says these areas are going to hold a lot of birds potentially and be able to sustain larger numbers of gobblers, more birds and stuff. So from a hunting standpoint, I'm like, okay, that is easy to me to understand. Like I should be looking for areas that have this type of habitat diversity, something that's going to support a large number of birds, especially if we're going out of state, right? I don't want to look at some. No, you can't. I'm not saying you can't find birds in a lot of areas, but just like kind of a monotonous, no diversity, like big forest. Like I'm probably not going to go there. I'm probably going to look for something like they talked about. That's something that's very diverse. And
there's always going to be a what would it be like a nucleus or whatever. Like there's
Correct.
always going to be that dot on the map though that they kind of go in and out of. Like that's where the majority of your birds can be found at some point during the day, and obviously it's going to relate back to food cover and the ability for a hen to nest. That we all know that you get just like we hunt the downwind side of bedding, we'll get on the outside of the nesting cover, and that's where he's going
Exactly.
to go strut and gobble because that's who he's breeding, you know. And then he's going to go in there and feed and do his thing, and so it only makes sense to me. I can't get the ratio out of my head though. Like with you talking about just year one, you're nearly one gobbler to every two hens. That's
Yes.
unreal. I've
That's
never seen that. I don't think
no.
ever.
I
That's
don't know that I have either.
that would be that'd be a hell of a time in the turkey woods.
Well, and the thought that runs through my head when we're talking about where would you look to find a bird if you're traveling out of state? What's the first thing you do when you get all the pieces out for a puzzle, Josh?
just like
What,
a general puzzle.
general
You're
puzzle. What's
traveling out of state. What's your first act?
Oh, I think he's talking about an actual.
I'm talking about an actual
Oh,
An
puzzle.
actual
What,
puzzle.
what
Look for the corners.
you
Oh,
look for the corners and you
okay.
look for the edges.
Yeah.
So like
I went another direction. That's where y'all hear about our brains working differently. There it was.
you look for corners, you look for edges. You look for the things that are going to help you solve the puzzle in the quickest manner possible. So if you take that same thought process with what birds like being in, and what areas to be like on public ground where you can get into that kind of stuff, it's going to be a lot easier for you. Like, there's birds in big woods. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of guys that we know from Wisconsin that do real well every year in big woods hunting, and with birds. Here, Ohio, Kentucky, outside of being like over in the eastern part of Kentucky, in the mountains and stuff, or if that's what you want to call them, you get a lot of habitat that birds love to be in, and you're going to find birds a lot quicker. I feel like in that type of stuff than you are wandering around the woods. And like you guys talked with Pierce last time, adventure is great. A dead bird is even better.
It is. It's why you're there. People that
It's why you're
talk
there.
about sunrises, go hiking.
Yeah,
That's all a
love
perk.
sunrises. I like a dead bird
Yeah.
sitting at my
We're-
feet at
we're here to
7:30
kill
a hell of a lot
turkeys.
more.
We're not here to see sunrises. That's just a perk and a part of the
Yeah.
feel good story while you're sipping coffee. We're here to kill turkeys.
Let me kill the turkey as soon as he hits the ground, and
Yeah.
then watch the sunrise.
Yeah,
with him
get your
next to him.
picture
sunrise.
with the sun through the tail fan like we like.
Exactly.
I love it.
So we'll kind of move on a little bit here. I wanted to take that point kind of one step further. There was so that what did I say? That was episode 122. Yeah. So back in episode 108 on that podcast, and again we'll link this in the show notes. They did an episode with a gentleman by the name of Zach Danks. Is that correct,
Yep.
Rick? Yeah.
Yep.
Who works in Kentucky. I think he's one of their
He's a state turkey biologist for Kentucky.
yes. Turkey, and then I want to say there's another game bird.
Is he grouse
I
management still?
think grouse management. I
Yeah.
think that is correct. So they had him on episode 108, and they eventually get to talking about the cicada hatches. And I can't remember if it was research that he's participating in. He also mentioned someone, I believe, from Tennessee Tech that they were doing some research as far as the cicada hatches. As some of our listeners might know, we had a fairly large one back in like 21 around
Yep.
our area. This year, in 2025, there's another large hatch that is brood 14, I believe. Is that correct, Rick?
Mm-hmm.
So in that podcast, they talk about brood 14, which is going to hatch this spring. Now,
Mhm.
this is the same brood that hatched so it's a 17-year hatch. They hatched in 2008 in
Yes.
Kentucky. So 2 years after the hatch. So you'd have 2-year gobblers, 2-year-old gobblers. And 20, geez, oh, Pete's, I can't.
2010.
2010. In 2010, Kentucky had the record harvest year. And Kentucky has never had another harvest that high. These past 2 years were close, but it's still not that record year. So he got to talking about this hatch again, and with some of the preliminary like research that's coming out, taking a look at the turkey populations about 2 years post these different hatches, and then how you get this large increase in bird numbers. Right, that hatch in 2008. Take the year 2010 for example, where you get that record harvest year. So it was very interesting when they got into it, and they got to talking about how the one caveat to that is, although that is interesting, it is nice to see that turkey boom. It may indicate that turkeys are somewhat insect dependent. So on an average year, right, they may lack that in their diet.
Mhm.
So it shows that there's a possible issue in their diet, right? If you take away the insects, then we're not sustaining these large populations or getting these population booms. So they eventually start talking about habitat improvement, habitat management. So what's going to provide, places where bugs are going to do well, and thus provide ample food for turkeys, right? Places where there is proper habitat. So I listened to that and I correlated it to that other episode in 122. And I was like, man, these go like hand in hand. You get habitat improvement, you get better food, more bugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just thinking in my head, those areas that you find when you're scouting and have that habitat diversity really kind of have everything to sustain those populations for a while. So from a hunting perspective, I feel like those areas to target, because not only are you going to get improved bird numbers, improved gobbler numbers, but they have the food necessary to sustain them.
And it's important to kind of also note, just because people might be rolling their eyes a little bit right now hearing this, I want to be very clear about something, just to remove an extraneous variable. Kentucky in those years did not add extra birds you could kill either.
Yeah.
Like it was a 2 bird state in the spring, and has been a 2 bird state in the spring for as long as I can remember. So it's not like suddenly like turkey numbers, like we're allowed to kill more turkeys or things along those lines. And realistically, the average turkey hunter in Kentucky only kills 1 bird.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, a lot of guys don't fill both their tags. The 2010 hatch, or the 2010 cicadas, or the sorry, I'm getting screwed up now. 2008, when the cicadas hatched, you have those broods that hatch along with those. You get a massive amount of protein from bugs, and these bugs. So I'll use the place where I live as an example. In 21, when that brood hatched, my my neighborhood is on an old farm, and we did not get the large amount of cicadas that other areas did. And you're probably thinking, like, well, why is that? Well, because this place didn't exist. So all the ground gets torn up, everything gets screwed around, all those different things. So it takes what was good habitat for these birds. And I'm just saying, like, around me, like there's a good number of birds. I can hear birds in the morning. I see them walking across the damn trail, the railroad tracks down the road from my house. There's birds around here, but they shift and they move to those areas where they know that they're going to find bugs. And if you've ever hunted turkeys, you can call to them in the morning, but the reality is that when you get to midday hunting, when you're allowed to do that in Ohio, or you can all day hunt in some states, you're going to find birds in weird places. And you're like, why the hell is that bird there? Well, that bird's there because they're looking for bugs. Like they're looking for things to eat. And while they're going out and they're doing all their little business after they're done screwing each other in the mornings, or going to for the hens to nest, you're gonna find gobblers out bugging through the middle of the day because it's hot and those bugs start getting up and they start moving. With cicadas, there's so many of them out in the open. It's just a protein rich environment for these things. So what ends up happening 2 years post is that it's a cascade effect. You have all these birds come out, and they still need to go out and find bugs. They're going to be more out where these bugs are going to be at. Where do bugs like to be? They like to be in areas where other bugs are. So pollinator habitat is a huge thing. They like to be in areas where they can be like out and away from shit too. You open I think I opened the crop of mine last year. It's full of grasshoppers, absolutely full of grasshoppers. But we hunt cow pasture where those are at. It's just a real important thing to think about in terms of population dynamics, because this isn't the only species that does this. This is a consistent thing that happens across lots of different species. Snowshoe hares are the same way. You have massive population booms and busts, which fluctuate lynx numbers out west and in Canada too. Like you can really correlate these things.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so like when you start looking at some of these other things that do this, and you start like looking at like, well, why are turkeys, so plentiful some years and then numbers are shit other years? This is one of those reasons why.
Why do you think that turkey numbers explode when there's a cicada harvest?
Like harvest numbers?
Sorry. Ridiculous. When there's a cicada hatch. We don't harvest cicadas. I'm half awake.
You're fine.
Why do you think the turkeys are booming 2 years prior, basically?
I think
post.
2 years post. because there's so much food on the landscape. Like all I can theorize is that those birds get fatter, healthier quicker, and they grow faster. You
Josh,
grow you grow faster, and you get into trees quicker. You don't have to worry about a freaking coyote coming and smoking you on the ground, or something goofy like that.
Yeah, and some of the episodes in that podcast, they do talk about with the habitat improvement and stuff, and you're also improving like food availability and stuff like that to the hens, and the result of that is a healthier population of hens, so
Correct.
their diets are able to sustain them, and what they see, I believe, is like larger clutch sizes potentially.
that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Also, seems like you basically have to travel less for food.
Correct.
Therefore, you're not in the danger zone as much. Maybe that'd
Why do
be
big bucks get big?
yeah. They don't have to go out in the open and screw around. We should all just start hunting red-tailed hawks and see how the
Let's
per-
not do that.
population. Everybody's bitching about the coons and the yotes, and it's like,
Well,
do you know what actually kills turkeys?
I'll get on my soapbox about that later.
I just wanted to fire Rick up.
I
The number one predator of the wild turkey,
is
freaking
the great
hoot
horned
owl.
owl.
They-
Is the great horned owl.
they do an episode on coyotes recent.
Really?
Yeah, I only got partially through it because it got a little dry, and I got
Oh
bored.
wow, got dry for you.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I'll go ahead and skip that one.
Well, they started off talking about the just basically how you had like the northern population of coyotes and southern, and then like how
Yeah.
they eventually like expanded. And I probably didn't get to the good parts, but it was taking longer
Yeah.
than I wanted, so I moved on to something else.
The southern coyote's definitely tougher to hunt too. So
Uh, so going back to the cicadas, there is another interesting way to look at this that I had mentioned to you guys. If you were to, so in
I'm gonna
theory,
pull it up.
yeah, you can pull up the brood map here, Rick. But so for our listeners, in theory, right, the research and probably anecdotal evidence would suggest that 2 years after a hatch of cicadas, you're going to have a fairly healthy population of birds. So if you were, and we know, going back to the habitat stuff, good habitat is going to produce potentially more gobblers and have a healthier population of birds in that area. So knowing those two things, what if you were to go through, let's say you're planning, so right now we're getting a large hatch. It's 2025. So in 2027, you would say there's a boom year of 2-year-old gobblers. Okay, now take that brood map where you know the hatch is going to happen, and then overlay that with public lands, or if you're a private land hunter, so areas that do habitat, some form of habitat management, whether it's like cutting, burning, etc. So overlay those two things, boom. I would say you probably have a very darn good starting point for picking out places to go hunt birds in 2027.
Absolutely.
I think you could have a banner year.
this is some Jake Bush soil map shit we got going on.
That's what it looks like.
This is awesome.
So yeah, well, hopefully we're able to kind of show this to you guys. We got a brood map up right now, but you can see, so on the lower right-hand side, you have kind of a key code there. So it shows all the different 17-year and 13-year broods. At the very bottom there, you can see there's a darker splotch that says where there's overlap. There's multiple ones in areas, which is interesting. Actually, in Ohio and then in parts of Indiana, there's multiple that overlap.
Now, let's talk about Arkansas, where Blake Brothers and Austin Crutchfield live. We don't need to talk about Ohio.
Or the
Ain't no turkeys
Northeast,
here.
where
Yeah.
up in the Pennsylvania
Or
New York
Tennessee.
area.
Let's talk about Maine up here. And you know what's disgusting to me? Maine would knock people's socks off, and they have 0 cicadas. So
All the turkeys are right
in
there.
case you don't know where Maine is, it's the McDonald's up top there. That's crazy though.
Yeah, brood at 14, you can see that like bright yellow green. There's the map there. It covers pretty much almost the entire state of Kentucky and then it gets into Tennessee as well, a little bit of Ohio, but that is the brood that is getting ready to hatch this spring. That was one to keep an eye on. But there's also one in 2021. So if you figure the one that hatched in 21, 23 was probably that boom year for 2-year-olds. We're only in 25. So I would imagine those areas are still probably going to be good if they have birds living longer, right?
Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, you should
Yeah.
have a hell of a
You
hell
could
of a
have
bird
some
bird year the next couple of,
you could
next
have
year.
some steroid out like 4-year-old birds, just boss toms out there, especially if you get in those areas with that have the habitat diversity. Those areas are probably going to be pretty dang good for a while.
That's pretty
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, but that's something when I was listening to those, I'm like, man, you could really utilize this information and try and plan for years to come and be efficient with it.
And if you're listening right now, you need to head over to the YouTube channel and check this out. Rick pulled this up and was just kind of showing off this map if you didn't catch on to that already.
Yeah, we have the map pulled up. So this could be a tool to utilize as you're planning for the upcoming years, especially in 2027 with this large hatch. I'll be curious to see what the harvest numbers are for like Kentucky and then into parts of Ohio and Tennessee, and see if we get that same kind of increase as they did in like 2010. That would be very interesting.
I want to know why cicadas don't exist all in those other places.
We have an entomologist on here. Maybe they'll be able to tell
I
us
mean, I
that.
kind of want to because,
Okay.
like, all these phenomenal bird states, like
So
breathtaking bird states, don't have cicadas.
if you're listening out there and you are an entomologist, not just a like avid bug collector, but like an actual entomologist, please contact us at we'll put it in the line notes. Put it Christopher Leppert at themobilehuntersexpo.com, Joshua Luck at mobilehuntersexpo.com, Richard Cates at themobilehuntersexpo.com. We would love to have you on to talk about this and how this ultimately happens and why they're so concentrated here versus other areas.
It's like when you look at the Northeast where there's billions of birds, Michigan, freaking Dakotas, Nebraska, like what's I would assume that it's just a simple we have giant grasshoppers. I've found grasshoppers that would kill you in Nebraska. So I found one almost as big as my hand, dude. So maybe that's a thing. Maybe those kill cicadas or whatever. But it'd just be an interesting bit of information to know because they're pretty centralized here.
Yeah, and I think Josh and I discussed this part too, is that when you look at this map and you really think about it and you think of 17-year cicadas. So 17-year cicadas, we're going to have a 2025 hatch this year. Previous one was 2008. What's 17 years minus 2008? It's 1991. A lot of people ask themselves, why turkey populations are so big during the middle of the 90s. Like it's the good old days of turkey hunting. What was happening in the early 90s with turkeys?
They were reintroducing them there.
We're reintroducing them. So there tends to be a thought in my head, and I've got no scientific means of proving this. If you're a biologist and you'd like to call in or tell us, I'd be happy to have this conversation. But there's cascading effects when you do things in nature. When you introduce a new thing a new thing onto the landscape, and they have a grossly large amount of food, they're going to boom pretty quickly. And you look at turkey numbers from the 80s, when they started reintroducing in the 70s into Ohio. If you want to go all the way back to episode 3, me and Chris
with your dad.
Talked to my dad who
Wow.
hunted birds in Ohio in the 70s when they first started reintroducing these things. Through the 80s, it was still pretty sparse. And if you talk to a turkey hunter in the Midwest, really, the good old days are like 95 to the mid 2000s. And then that's when populations really start to fall off. And there's, a multitude of factors there, but there becomes this reality that when you're reintroducing something, and it has a massive food source, it's going to boom very quickly, and you're going to hit a peak, and then eventually it'll plateau, and then it'll fall off. So there may be some reality that when you overlay these maps, that's part of the reason why the wild turkey did so well in the Midwest at that time.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Should we give away all the secrets? Because there's another layer to that scouting.
Man, I don't know. Maybe you could text it to me. We've given away some pretty golden shit here. I feel like you basically just held a bunch of people's hands and told them where to go. Hey, look at this map.
Here,
Now,
it's in our notes if you want to look.
Which
I
one?
will.
Right here?
No, the
Yeah,
bottom
right
one.
there.
Oh. Oh. Nah.
Nah, we'll let you guys figure that out.
Nah.
If
We
you're
don't
really
want-
upset about it, you'll have to comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm going to get on my soapbox now about this. So I just mentioned about food. During this time, and we get a lot of people that love hunting coyotes. We get a lot of people who want to say that raccoons are, the devil's creatures and come out and like massacre every frickin' turkey on the face of the earth. People need to remember through the 90s, raptor reintroduction was a massive thing. We have brought back raptors. And when I say raptors, I don't mean dinosaurs. I mean
Clever girl.
owls, hawks, eagles.
Every time.
Over the course of the 90s and into the early 2000s, we saw massive population booms. Well, there's another reason for that too, is that turkeys are food for those things.
The turkeys
So
are their cicadas.
the turkeys are their cicadas. So you're increasing a population, and those birds are coming in and they're whacking them off the limb, or they're grabbing poults and that kind of stuff off the ground. So again, to go back to what Josh and Chris said earlier, if you have ground cover, it's a hell of a lot harder for an owl to see a poult in a field that has laid over grass than it is in open woods or is in an open field. There's a reason you hear more, at least for me, I hear more great horned owls during the months of April through May, and maybe it's just because we're out earlier, but I certainly don't hear them as much in the deer woods.
Right.
Like you hear them when turkeys are gobbling. You hear them when hens are making noise, and that's a large reason raptor populations are as great as they are too. And I love hawks. They're my favorite animal, like hands
Really?
down. Yeah, like if anyone ever asks me like what kind of animal would you be, a red-tailed hawk every single time. I think they're the coolest bird on the face of the earth.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're a Vince Carter fan? Didn't he
I
play for the
am-
Hawks?
No.
I thought he did at one point.
Pretty sure he
Played
played
for the
Raptors.
Raptors. I know
played
he
for
did
the
that.
Raptors.
Clever girl.
I'm pretty sure he did play for the Hawks, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played for the Hawks at like the end of
Dude,
his
he's your
career,
favorite
right?
player. Called it. Raptors and Hawks.
He's
I
just
hated him when he was at North Carolina, though. Nothing against Vince Carter, but I didn't like him when he was at North Carolina.
I didn't know he was at North Carolina.
Going back to the red-tailed hawk. What? And I definitely agree. I will never forget that hunt you and I
Dude,
had, Chris.
I was
Man.
thinking about it the whole time he was talking.
Where Chris and I we talked about this on another episode, probably last spring. But Chris and I you were shooting, I was filming.
Yeah.
And we were just trying to just look over this little knoll on this hillside, big open hillside, because there was a gobbler and a hen. So we were peeking over, we were watching the hen, and all of a sudden we hear this noise come flying over our head, and this hawk just nailed this hen in this open field. Like just a bomber, just bam.
You can't imagine how hard he tagged that hen.
It was crazy.
Feathers went everywhere. It was not, and you could tell there were all kinds of F-bombs coming out of her mouth, racial slurs, you name it, dude. She was pissed. The cackling that she did, I had never heard anything like that before.
And
It
then-
was awesome.
And then I think
It's
it was
crazy to think about that.
Yeah, that's wild. I will never forget that. And then last year, I was on a place in Kentucky that we've hunted, and I remember hearing some birds, and then they got quiet, and I'm like, man, like why they were just hammering. Like, why are they quiet? And I happened to look up, and there's 3 red-tailed hawks just flying around, and I was like, well, there's my answer. That's why they shut up.
You know, I was hunting with my father-in-law Greg in some farmland, and I normally let him chill in his blind with his decoys in front of him. We had shitty decoys at the time, and I'll go off and sneak around and hopefully get on a bird. I came back, and his Jake was gone. I'm like, what now? I'm like, Greg, where's your decoy? It's like, well, I couldn't get it to stand up. And of course, I'm the most patient of all time. And before he could say anything else, I'm like, what the hell do you mean you can't get it to stand up? And he's like, dude, you're not gonna believe it. There was a red-tailed hawk circling, and he hit that decoy with such force that he snapped the very, very thick plastic stake, like an unreal thick, like you gotta smoke
One of those
this
like
thing.
Walmart steaks that they like those thick like.
Very thick.
Yep.
I mean, I never broke one. If that says anything, like they're thick. And
Mhm.
he was like, dude, he hit it and broke it like it wasn't even there, and then realized that it wasn't a turkey and flew off. So he collected his decoy and put it in a blind. I'm like, what are the only you, man? Like, what are the odds of this?
I can think of on like one hand where I've gotten in like a serious argument with my dad about something, and he says he's told me like you're lying about this. When I was on the farm when that bird hit when the hawk hit the bird that you and Josh are talking about, and I'm telling my dad about this. He goes, I've turkey hunted for 40 years, and he goes, I've never heard of this. I've never seen this, and he goes, I don't believe you. I'm
Our
like,
story?
Dad, huh?
Our story?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He goes, I don't believe you. Ohio's opener happens. The first day he sets up his hen decoy, he calls me like he does after every hunt, and he goes, I gotta apologize to you. I'm like, for what? And he goes, I had a hawk smoke my hen and put a hole in it. And he goes, it came down over the top of the blind and just smoked the decoy. And he goes, I've never had it happen. And he goes, and this is twice in 1 year where this has happened now where I've heard this.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder
That's funny.
wonder if I can find that footage, and maybe we'll throw it up here on a reel or something.
That'd be pretty cool.
That'd be sweet.
I think I
yeah.
still have it.
We didn't. I know we missed I think we missed the initial contact,
Yeah.
but I think you got the hen
You got the hen making the
dropping
noise.
f
Oh
bombs.
yeah.
Dude, there's no I guarantee she dropped words you can't say in public. She was pissed off. She didn't know which way to go either. It was awesome.
Oh man, good times.
What?
Good times.
Real quick, you guys got those Richardson's
Yes.
calls in. What's your favorite?
I am a whore for a ghost cut
Damn.
call. I love ghost cut calls, and the Gainesville ghost that he makes is really good.
What?
I will say this though. I like the controlled chaos
Yeah.
the best.
Why?
Like
Why
it-
do you prefer ghost cut?
I find it way easier to work. I have trouble like if they're what's the like a bat wing cut. Like
Mhm.
I can't ever get them to sound the way that I feel like a turkey should sound. It sounds like a 5-year-old with a rusty box call, and
Well,
like
that ghost cut is very centered. So maybe your
Yeah.
main airway that you like to work with is centered. I
Yeah.
can't work the right side of my mouth. It's center or left, primarily left, but I can work the center. So for that reason, I do like that same thing that Gainesville ghost that you like. That's the one I've been leaning towards the most. I finally tried the last one. I don't have the controlled chaos, which now I wish I do. Hearing how much you like it.
It's
it's
good.
nuts. Like I can't explain it because like you can make like 5 different like vocalizations, and I don't just mean like tree yelps and that kind of stuff. Like it sounds like 5 different birds
Yeah.
when you're using it.
Yeah. I think Josh is kind of onto something. Like, I think everybody's super unique in how they're able to control their airflow, the pressure. Like, it's super complicated. I was
Mhm.
playing with one today called Toxicity.
Yep.
And I think so far that's actually the best I've ever sounded. So I'm pretty excited. I hope I can keep that up. I get weird because I know that you stretch that latex out over time, especially if you're doing it for hours a day. So I'm like, all right, let's just play with this for like 10 minutes each day, and then we'll just blow this damn thing out during the season. And if we got to order more, so be it. But I got a couple that I really like. The other one is that Gainesville Ghost. It's pretty
Yeah.
good.
I
Yeah.
like that one. I got the left cutter. Like I said, I like to work the left side of my mouth. And I've only played around with that one once, but I like that one
Yeah.
as well. I felt like I could control it well.
Yeah.
That one, the hammering hen, I was doing okay with. I need more practice with. It's got more of a rasp to it
Yep.
compared to that Gainesville Ghost. But that wasn't bad. The toxicity, I haven't played with that one in a while. I need to go back and play with that one. I don't think I could control that one that well. On the drive here, I tried the limb hanger.
Yeah.
And
That's a good one.
I can't work it at all.
Really.
Yeah, that has been my personally, just because it's the cuts are on the right side. I can't work it.
Okay.
That's been the toughest
That's
for
your
me.
that's your hang up.
Yeah,
Man.
that's my hang up.
I expect you to be at least Rick Cates level good, so you can drop back and call for me too. This isn't a one-sided relationship here. Don't Chris Leppert Pierce more me.
I can if I'm dropping back, and I can use that pot call too.
Damn
I'm way better with that than the mouth call.
Just go back there and scratch the leaves.
I can get loud, get quiet. I was practicing a fly down with that thing earlier.
Sounding pretty good.
Yeah, I mean better than I can do with a mouth call.
We
Yeah.
need to do a giveaway for one of those.
Shout out to Austin Crutchfield for those, man.
Yeah.
Those are,
Yeah.
those are
Austin
banger
makes some
calls, man.
damn good calls. Why don't let's come up with a way for next week's episode to structure a giveaway for those calls, because right now is about the time that we need to do that anyway. So they're super freaking nice.
Man, are they ever?
Did you
They're
get
great.
yours?
Wait, this isn't one, is it?
That is one. It's just
That
not
is
one of
one
the
of
podcast ones.
Oh,
Here, they're right here.
we can show this here.
Obviously, I'm not even going to dare touch one because it's not like probably roughed how I'd want it and everything, but I will do it anyway.
I was gonna say it looks fine.
They're pretty sweet though. You can kind of see. I'll show it on here. Then we'll show it
Yeah.
here.
It'll zoom in.
There
you go.
Pretty slick.
Mind if I try that?
Give
I
her-
got a
give her
couple
a whirl.
different strikers.
My theory that I'm going to try to put into practice with my calling this year, which I've done it. It's not like I don't, but I will admit, when you start getting okay with those mouth calls, it's really easy to start screaming at turkeys.
It
It is.
Really quick. You just so my goal. I think a lot of people do that, and so my goal is to coach myself each time and just say, "What would Pierce do?" and climb up, and then climb down, and respond loud, excited. Maybe a time or two or whatever, but not get too crazy, especially down south. I've heard a lot about those birds. Once you get past opening day, probably they're getting screwed with. Turkey hunting's awesome all over the country for the most part, but it's a culture down south.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
different down there. And when the south starts kind of closing down a little bit and getting later in their season, they're all up here and all over the place. Like you go to Indiana and Kentucky, here in southern Ohio, you go up into the northeast, you're going to see people from North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Arkansas, they're all over the place.
Mhm.
And again, like talk anybody that knows Austin Crutchfield and Blake Brothers on our the Mobile Hunter group. Those
Mm-hmm.
dudes travel all over the place and kill birds. So damn Southerners, man, they'll get after them turkeys. So you got to be careful. I think they're a little. I don't want to say call shy. I don't know yet, but I think you probably got to chill on them a little bit from what I've heard.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
learned less is more for me.
Yeah.
So
Well, scratching the leaf, soft and scratching the leaves when you can. And the other thing that I think is huge is if you got a buddy, have that dude drop back over the hill or whatever, 40, 50, 60 yards behind you and pitch calls all over the place. Because watch a hen. A hen is never looking in one direction when their freaking heads are on a swivel while they're calling. And could you imagine talking to me going like that? Like I could never even accomplish that. So, just to be able to sound realistic, and I think it makes it a little tougher for them to just peg right where you are and then pop that head up over and they'll 6 inches and never mind, bye.
mhm.
So I think it helps a lot.
Absolutely.
Well, did we have anything else to
I do.
really?
I got one
oh,
other
You
thing.
got one more
So,
soapbox.
Yeah, well, not even a soapbox. It's more about like we've talked a lot about habitat improvement and things of that nature, and the bull. We've had Alan Summerfield on here. And he does a lot of habitat improvement.
Mm-hmm.
The thing to remember about this for people is, um, a lot of habitat and conservation work is done on private land. If you have private land and this is something that interests you, there are plenty of programs and things through your state
Dude.
and through the USDA that you can apply for that they will come help you work on. They will send somebody to your property and they will come over and look and say, here's how much you can have for pollinator habitat. Here's how much we can put in for if you want it for deer or that kind of persimmons, oaks, whatever. There's lots of programs that are available to the general public. These are important programs. These don't always get done on public ground. If you've been to Kentucky, we have a way of doing things in our state where there's different levels for the WMAs, whether they are touched at all or whether they are highly maintained. So I say all that to say this: if you have private ground and you're looking to do some of this kind of stuff, get a hold of some of these habitat projects, or there's plenty of stuff. What is it? Native Habitat Managers is a Facebook group online. There's plenty of people who can help you with that. Roundstone Seed in Kentucky is one of the largest seed producers in the United States for native seeds and that kind of stuff. All these places are willing to help and build habitat for the things that you want and love. And just because we're talking about turkey, remember there's a deer behind Josh and Chris right now on the wall, and there's a deer I know sitting in front of Chris right now. Like if you want deer that look like that, it's not going to just pop out of the woodwork. But if you want to start having things like that around you, work to have that type of habitat near you versus, and I don't mean this in an ill proper way, versus just plain row crop ag or plain food plots. It's important to get things that are good for all seasons for animals. And I know this might sound like a soapbox speech, but I really encourage people to utilize these programs, because if you don't use them, they go away.
Yep.
And if they go away, they ain't coming back. So be aware of that there's plenty of things out there to get grant wise and for people to help you.
Hell yeah, dude. Well said.
Yep.
All
Okay.
right. Well, guys, we really appreciate you listening in. And if you got anything that you like to hear turkey wise, write one of us, message us on Facebook, whatever. But otherwise, I think we'll go ahead and let the Pickles Ricklington here close us out, huh?
Absolutely. Guys, you've been listening to the Mobile Hunter Podcast. We've been your hosts, Rick Cates, Chris Leppert, and Josh Luck. Thanks for stopping in and listening to us, guys. Talk at you later. Bye.
See you.
See ya.